Well, before we get into our teaching, I want to tell you something I just found out this past week, and I'm really excited about. Now, most of you know that we do our AGM, our annual general meeting, a little bit different around here. We begin with an everybody bring your best dish, your best dessert potluck. 6 o'clock this next Sunday night. Next Sunday, we're gathering together over at the warehouse. Everybody's going to bring their food. And then we, after that, we get into our AGM part of it. But it's not just an AGM. It's not boring. We have worship, and we have a celebration of stuff that's been going on, a little bit of business. So you probably know that part of it. What you may not know, and I just found out this past week, is that our Ascent worship team, which is our young adult worship team, have written what we believe to be the first ever original Riverwood worship song. And they're going to be debuting it at our AGM this next week. And so I am so excited. They led worship at our first Tuesday this last week. Incredible. And they're going to be debuting this worship song, first ever for Riverwood. And so we're going to have lots of opportunities to celebrate. If you, everybody's invited to this gathering, especially if you're a covenant community, if you're part of our covenant community, it's pretty essential that you're either there or you vote in advance in accordance with the email that we sent you. But it's going to be a great celebration this next week. Now, something else that was breaking news this last week coming out of Israel, and maybe you saw it, a 3-year-old girl named Ziv. Ziv was out kind of hiking with her family. They were poking around an archaeological site. It's called Tel Azekah. Tel Azekah is about 40 kilometers west of Jerusalem. She's with her family. Tel Azekah, you may not recognize the name, but it's actually where David and Goliath had their big battle, so it's a pretty significant place. Well, this 3-year-old is doing what 3-year-olds do. She's playing with rocks. And so she's, not too interested in the archaeological stuff, but she's playing with rocks, and she finds a pretty rock. And she takes it, and she's got it, and she's cleaning it off, and she's cleaning the sand and the dirt out of it, and this rock looks a little different. So she takes it to her sisters and says, "Look at my pretty rock." And her sisters look at it, and they think there's something kind of different about this rock. So they take it to their parents, and the parents look at it, and they're pretty sure this rock, wasn't some trinket from, Taiwan or from a Kinder Surprise or something. There's something about this that's really interesting. So they turn it over to the Israeli Antiquities Authority, and not long after that, this Antiquities Authority comes back and says, "Ziv, you found a 3,800-year-old scarab that originated in Egypt." Now, the scarab is designed in the shape of the sacred dung beetle. It was used in Egypt for good luck, as part of jewelry, as an important seal. So it was often found in important places or in graves or in private homes. And the Israeli Antiquities Authority was so excited about this lost treasure that Ziv found that they arranged a moment for them to present a certificate of appreciation for their findings. And it was all a little much. Ziv appeared to actually be a little overwhelmed by this entire experience. Probably didn't really know what was going on with her pretty rock. But it's pretty crazy that for thousands of years, close to 4,000 years, people have been walking over and shuffling around and stepping on and kicking this ancient scarab, completely missing the remarkable and priceless find that was right under their feet. Well, as we make our way into our 5th weekend out of 6 weekends studying the book of Ecclesiastes, today we together are going to pick up a pretty rock. And as we pick up this pretty rock, we're going to discover it actually is a long-forgotten, priceless treasure. Now, if you are just joining us today for the first time or maybe fairly recent in this series, let me bring you up to speed. About 5 weeks ago, we began studying one of the most profound, confusing, difficult, depressing, despondent, mysterious books of the Bible, the 12-chapter long, 3,000-year-old book that we believe King Solomon wrote called Ecclesiastes. 38 times in this book, it's only 12 chapters long, but 38 times we find the word vanity. often interpreted in our modern Bibles as meaningless. Vanity, vanity, everything's meaningless. Everything is meaningless, Solomon says. Now, Solomon, you have to realize, was ridiculously wealthy, ridiculously wise. He lived a very opulent, very extravagant life. We did some calculations from what the Bible tells us was his yearly wage, and we realized that he was making the equivalent today of $2.3 billion a year was his salary. He had all sorts of opulence, plus 700 wives and 300 live-in girlfriends, and yet he comes to the end of his life, and he looks in the rearview mirror of his life, and he says, I have lived at the pinnacle of pleasure and success and wealth, and I will tell you something from my experience, it's all meaningless. It's all vanity. It's like chasing the wind. Now, spoiler alert, we discovered, because we needed to do this early in order to study this book, we needed to wrap our minds around how did this book ever make it into the Bible? And what is the meaning of this book? And what we discovered was that 57 times is this phrase, under the sun. Everything is meaningless under the sun. And he goes on, and in essence what Solomon is saying is, look, when you live from a human perspective and only for human goals, and you only have your aspirations on the things under the sun, it's like chasing the wind. It's meaningless. It's like running in circles. It is all meaningless. Solomon isn't saying that life is without value. He's saying that life without God is empty. He's saying life has no meaning apart from the meaning maker. So don't live your life just for what is under the sun, but live your life for the one who is above the sun. So far, we've tackled chapter 1. We were brave enough to tackle chapter 2 and 3, and then last week we did chapter 4 to 7. This week we find ourselves in our obligation to walk you through the book of Ecclesiastes in chapters 8 to 10. Now, I will confess to you that I spent an abnormal amount of time wrestling these chapters down and not understanding them. I spent a lot of time this past week going ahead of us trying to ask God, what in the world are you saying in these chapters? What do you want us to walk away with? What are we supposed to get from these chapters? You see, chapters 8 to 10 is a little like a Swedish smorgasbord. It's got a little bit of everything. In fact, I did a count and an analysis of the numbers of topics in these chapters, and there are no less than 25. 25 topics on leadership and death and injustice and success and the unpredictability of life and the value of work and materialism and the importance of respecting authority, plus 17 other topics. However, as I was digging around in chapters 8 to 10, I came across a pretty rock. A pretty rock that I believe has been long forgotten. I began dusting it off. I began scraping the sand out of it. And I discovered what I believe is a lost treasure that most people in our culture these days are simply kicking around and walking over without even knowing it's there. As I began to dust it off, I discovered this one word is used 48 times in Ecclesiastes, so it's quite prominent. I discovered that in the ancient Hebrew original language, it's not just one word, it's actually 5 different Hebrew words, which means it's multifaceted, it's nuanced, it takes a lot of work to grasp what is the full meaning. It's very, very rich. And it turns out that this word, as I turned it over in my hands and scraped the dirt off of it, I realized that almost nobody is using this word today. Almost nobody is putting anything of news events or life experiences through the grid of this work. I mean, somebody might use the phrase or the word, but for all intents and purposes, it has fallen out of vogue, and people don't even know how to define it anymore. In fact, I was watching some philosophers trying to define the word, and they did not agree on the definition. And yet the Bible sets this word up, this treasure, as a treasure, and says that this treasure is a gift from God. What we're going to talk about today is a gift from God to humanity. This treasure is more valuable than wealth. The Bible says that this treasure is a source of strength. It leads to a joyful life. It helps you. It is the thing that's going to help you make good decisions. It will protect you. The Bible says that this treasure gives peace and purpose, and it is the key to a successful life in flourishing relationships and endeavors. So, if maybe you've already figured out what this treasure is. If you haven't, let me reveal it for you. It is simply wisdom. Wisdom. Now, in order to study this idea of wisdom that we find in Ecclesiastes 8 to 10, we're going to need a working definition. So here's as good as I can do. Wisdom is the ability to apply knowledge and experience and good judgment to navigate life's complexities. Anybody in this room, anybody watching online have any complexities in life? Any puzzles, any troubles that seem to be beyond you? This is what it's used for. Now, just to kind of point out, now we could go on forever with this, but just to kind of point out why it's so important to have all three. Knowledge without experience and without judgment equals arrogance in a lab coat. All right, so they're smart, but it's untested and totally out of touch with reality, just having knowledge. Having judgment without knowledge or experience is safe but stuck. You're never going to risk, you're never going to grow, you're going to avoid all the cliffs, but then again, you're not going to climb any mountains either. It's going to be so safe. Knowledge plus good judgment without experience is theory without traction. These people can teach, they can tweet, they can post, but they don't live it themselves. And one more, knowledge plus experience without good judgment is talented disasters. Brilliant minds with broken compasses. They know and they do, but it becomes a mess. But wisdom is the remarkable combination between knowledge plus experience plus good judgment for the purpose of navigating life's complexities. Now, the Bible makes it super clear that there are actually two kinds of wisdom. Let me point this out in a couple of passages. One, James chapter 3. The wisdom of this world should never be mistaken for heavenly wisdom. There they are, right there. There's two different kinds. The wisdom of this world, it originates in the earthly realms with the demons. Any place where you find jealousy and selfish ambition, you will discover chaos and evil thriving under the rule. The wisdom that comes down from above, heavenly wisdom, centers on purity, peace, gentleness, deference, mercy, and other good fruits. 1 Corinthians chapter 1 goes on to explain and to show us this difference again. It says this, "For in God's deep wisdom, He made it so that the world could not even begin to comprehend Him through its own style of wisdom." Knowledge is not wisdom. Experience is not wisdom. Having good judgment is not wisdom. And even when you have knowledge plus experience plus good judgment, there is a wisdom that finds its source in the world, and then there is a wisdom, the Bible says, that comes from above. There's a wisdom that comes to us powered by God. Most people know nothing about wisdom. It's a lost commodity. People today want to be smart. They want to be knowledgeable. They want to be educated with many degrees. But they don't realize that God offers to supercharge their knowledge and experience and judgment with a power beyond themselves that He calls wisdom from God. To make this a little more understandable and tangible, because it's a little hard to kind of grasp, let me make a couple other statements about this. Knowledge is knowing a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing that tomatoes don't belong in a fruit salad. Okay, you see the difference? Knowledge is knowing the right thing to say. Wisdom is knowing when to say nothing. Knowledge is knowing how to outsmart your opponent. Wisdom is knowing when to walk away without a fight. Now, the Bible uses this word wisdom 48 times just in the book of Ecclesiastes. We are limiting our study today to Ecclesiastes 8, 9, and 10. The reality is we could do a 10-week series on wisdom and we would only be scratching the surface of what the Bible says. But let's limit ourselves to chapters 8 to 10. Ecclesiastes 8, verse 1, we learn, number 1, about wisdom. Wisdom is transformative. Wisdom is transformative. There's nothing better than being wise, knowing how to interpret the meaning of life. Wisdom puts light in the eyes and gives gentleness to words and manners. Every one of us has an internal default, an internal programming, kind of a default of our reactions to different situations. So I can tell you, because I've lived long enough to watch my own human default, when it comes to conflict, my default in a conflict situation is often worry or fear or defensiveness or panic. That's just sort of my default. That's what naturally comes out of me. When I get into a tough decision-making situation, my default is often doubt, feeling overwhelmed, again, worry and fear, and often reluctance. And the reason for this is because our human defaults are limited. We only have so much capacity. We only have so much capacity to discern what's going on around us. And when it comes to what comes out of my mouth, when I get into a conflict situation, often when I get a conflict situation with my wife, Carolyn, or I get into a difficult decision-making situation, the default is what comes out of my mouth is a reflection of what's going on inside. So I often get sarcastic, or I'll get cutting, or I'll get negative or pessimistic or defensive. You see, the problem is that our default system is limited. And therefore, it pulls from our fears and our emotions and experiences. So what we need in these conflict situations, what we need in these difficult decision moments, we need something from beyond ourselves because we're limited. We need something more than ourselves. And that's where wisdom comes in. Solomon says there's nothing better than being wise, knowing how to interpret the meaning of life. Wisdom puts light in the eyes and gives gentleness to the words and manners. It overrides the default system to give gentleness to words and manners. Now the word, we're not going to look at all the different Hebrew words, but a few of them just to kind of get a sense of this. The word that Solomon uses here is chachmah. Now, Chachmah means wisdom like a sage in battle. Imagine a sage in battle. Wisdom like a master craftsman building something valuable. Wisdom transforms you into a seasoned sage, wise sage in battle, and an experienced, skilled master builder. Without wisdom, you get into a conflict situation or you get into a difficult decision-making situation or a pressure situation and you react out of your default. But with wisdom, you respond. Without wisdom, you panic. With wisdom, you begin to perceive. You're like a sage in battle. Without wisdom, you speak without thinking. How many of us speak without thinking? And stuff just blurts out of us. That's our default. But with wisdom, you begin to pause and reflect. And when you do say something, you offer something that is life-giving. Your responses, decisions, and demeanor are transformed by wisdom. And so this verse really asks us a question. Where in your life are you operating out of your default system? Do you see yourself operating often out of your default system? And do you even realize that there is an opportunity, there's something beyond yourself, which is the wisdom of God? Number 2, wisdom is humble. Ecclesiastes 8:17. When I determined to load up on wisdom and examine everything taking place on the earth, I realized you'll never figure out the meaning of what God is doing on this earth. Search as hard as you like. You're not going to make sense of it. No matter how smart you are, you won't get to the bottom of it. Now, that is not meant to be discouraging. That's meant to remind us of our place in the universe. Wise people continue to doubt themselves because that is a part of being wise. Wise people know that they don't know it all. The ancient Greek philosopher Socrates said it this way: the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. The only true wisdom is knowing that you know nothing. Thomas Jefferson put it this way: he who knows most knows best how little he knows. You need to be walking in humility and teachability. The ancient word here that Solomon uses in this verse is a little bit different. It's hakam. And hakam means that it is not easily deceived. It's not gullible. It spots deception and pitfalls and navigates complex situations with strategic thinking. It's like a grand chess master. Or today it would be like a cybersecurity expert. It knows where the dangers are coming. Wisdom isn't just about knowing what's right. Wisdom is also knowing where the trouble can come from. And there is no greater deception than our own pride. There's no greater deception than our own self-confidence. If you want to operate with wisdom, with this superpower that helps you to live beyond your own limitations, you're going to need humility and teachability. You've never met somebody who is proud and arrogant and wise at the same time, because they're mutually exclusive. And when you find in yourself pride and arrogance rising up, you can be sure that that is not wisdom. Wise people readily acknowledge that they don't have all the answers. Wise people don't always claim to be right. Wise people aren't fooled by their own bravado and self-reliance. Wise people know their place in the universe, and they realize that they are not the center of the universe, and there is much to learn. Now, this really leads us to a very intriguing question, which is this: is wisdom something that's just innate, that you're just born with, that you're just given, or can you actually grow and develop wisdom? Well, we're going to stick with Solomon, but we're not going to stick with Ecclesiastes. We're going to jump over to his other book, Proverbs. And in Proverbs chapter 2, he's speaking as a father would speak to a son. We also realize these are God's words to us, and it says this: every person who listens to me and obeys my instructions will be given wisdom. Yes, if you want better insight and discernment and are searching for them as you would for lost money or a hidden treasure, then wisdom will be given you and knowledge of God himself. You will soon learn the importance of reverence for the Lord and trusting him. From this passage, we learned a couple of additional characteristics of wisdom. Number 3, wisdom is a valuable treasure. The word here that Solomon uses is our third Hebrew word, binah. Binah means wisdom like a detective solving a deep mystery, or wisdom like unlocking a puzzle and solving problems. Solomon says, go after that kind of wisdom. Go after that kind of wisdom like you would lost money or a hidden treasure. Who wouldn't want some supercharged ability to begin to solve the problems in their life? Who here wouldn't want some supercharged ability to begin to unravel the mysteries and the difficulties that they're facing? This wisdom from God makes that possible when we go after it. Number 4, wisdom is for everyone. Wisdom is for everyone who will go on a hunt, like looking for that pretty rock, looking for that lost treasure, for that lost money. You don't need to wait until your hair turns gray or until you have no hair at all in order to go after wisdom. We often think of wisdom as being relegated to those who are old, but the scriptures seem to tell us something different. And so I want to put it this way: you can be 15 years old. You can be 19 years old. You can be 27 or 32 years old and seek to live a life of wisdom. Wisdom is for everyone. James chapter 1 verse 5 puts it so clearly. If you need wisdom, if you need some perspective, some knowledge, experience, and sound judgment beyond your default settings, beyond yourself, you need some perspective from somewhere else. If you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and He will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. God loves when we ask for wisdom. Anybody here need some wisdom today? Anybody who's a parent, maybe you need some parenting wisdom. Or maybe you have teenage kids and you need some wisdom on knowing how to guide them through this very challenging culture. Anybody need wisdom about who to date or who to marry? Anybody need wisdom about how to solve that conflict situation you're having with somebody? Anybody need wisdom on how to deal with that difficult boss or to navigate that health issue? Whether you should stay in your current job or you should quit your job and take a risk and go do something else. Anybody need wisdom on how to revive and revitalize their marriage? How to beat a secret sin or an addictive habit? How to manage and live in this world of financial chaos right now? Anybody need wisdom on how to run their business, whether you should expand your business right now or you should be selling your business? The list goes on and on and on. Look, the world is not talking about wisdom. You're not going to hear CBC, CTV, CNN, NBC, Fox. Nobody's talking about wisdom because it is a lost treasure, but it is a treasure. There are two kinds of wisdom. There's a worldly wisdom, born of knowledge, experience, and good judgment in the world, and then God lets us know that there is another kind of wisdom, a wisdom that comes from heaven itself. In fact, this is as good a time as any to tweak our definition to a more biblical perspective. And so let's update our definition to read this way. Wisdom is the ability to apply knowledge, experience, and sound judgment rooted in God's truth to navigate life's complexities. All right, we got just a couple more learnings from these passages. Number 5, wisdom is fragile and easily lost. Chapter 10, verse 1. As dead flies cause even a bottle of perfume to stink, so a little foolishness spoils great wisdom and honor. A little bit of different picture there, so let's read that again. As dead flies cause even a bottle of perfume to stink, so a little foolishness spoils great wisdom and honor. Solomon is warning us that when it comes to wisdom, you cannot be lax. You cannot be lazy. You cannot just coast. One lapse of judgment, one moment of foolishness, one compromised decision will discredit your reputation of being someone who is living a life of wisdom. On September 23rd of 1999, after having traveled 192 million kilometers, the Mars Climate Orbiter made its final approach to Mars. It had taken the scientists 4 years, about 350 people, and $328 million to build this remarkable spacecraft. A spacecraft that was about the about the size of a large refrigerator. It was designed to orbit around Mars and to collect data. And the Mars Climate Orbiter was a technological wonder. They had pored over every engineering detail, every construction detail. The mission, 192 million kilometers of flight, everything was flawless. It was perfect. And as the orbiter approached Mars, instead of flying a safe 226 kilometers above the surface, mysteriously, for some unknown reason, it flew 57 kilometers above the surface. And the atmosphere heated it up and it disintegrated. And it was gone. Scientists poured over. What in the world happened? And what they discovered was that one group of programmers was using metric while the other group was using imperial. And a few wrongly placed keystrokes caused 4 years, 192 million kilometers, and $328 million of spacecraft to disintegrate. Solomon puts it this way: dead flies make the perfume's ointment get into a stench. Dead flies cause the bottle of perfume to stink, so a little foolishness will spoil great wisdom. It's amazing how a few centimeters and inches could destroy such a remarkable venture. And Solomon warns that even in your life, you might have some dead flies today in the perfume of your life. Be very, very careful, because it takes nothing to wipe out wisdom. It's fragile and easily lost. And then this brings us to our final point, and we'll close on this. Ecclesiastes 10:2, a very simple little phrase, and it says this: a wise person chooses the right road, a fool takes the wrong one. I'd love to wrap this point up with a story of a guy named Harlan. Harlan had a difficult life. He was born, I think it was about 1890, and he made some really bad choices. His first came when he was 12 years old. He decided at 12 years old to drop out of school. He said math and calculus and things like that were useless, and he had no use for them, and found them very difficult and unnecessary, so he dropped out of school. He went and got some odd jobs, but it seemed like every odd job that he got himself into, he ended up getting fired from. So he went back to school and managed to get a law degree, and he became a lawyer, and that went well for a couple of years, until he ended up having a physical brawl with his own client in the courtroom. They had a punching match, and that kind of ended his law career. So he decided to move into a different industry. He decided to develop and build gas lamps, and he was just about to launch his business of gas lamps when the electric light bulb hit the market, completely killing his business. Looking back, Harlan would admit that he had the string of failures because he was bullheaded, impatient, lacked self-control, he was self-righteous, and he had a smug attitude. Well, in 1930, he caught a break. The Shell Motor Oil Company offered to give Harlan a service station rent-free to start a restaurant. And business was good until Harlan got into a shootout with a competitor who had painted over Harlan's sign, and he had to sell the restaurant. He ended up buying a motel, and that was going okay until the motel burnt down. So he rebuilt it as a restaurant, and he was beginning to make money. And then in 1941, World War II broke out. Gas was rationed, tourism shut down, and he lost the restaurant again. Harlan moved to another restaurant, and things were just beginning to go good, and then Interstate 75 was built. It stole all the traffic, and he had to close that restaurant. By this time, Harlan is 65 years old, and all he has is a string of bad decisions and mistakes and failures. This is a time in life when most people would just roll the credits on their life. Too many setbacks, too many failures, too many mistakes. He's old. What does he matter? What does it matter anymore? And so he's faced with one more road, one more decision. Will he fade into obscurity, or against all the odds, will he take his little bit of savings and his $105 a month of Social Security checks, and will he try again? And he discerns that he needs to try again. And so he does. He hits the road, often sleeping in his car at night, and he drives across the country trying to sell his chicken recipe to restaurant owners. It said that Harlan Sanders was rejected 1,009 times. But along the way, he made enough sales to launch his franchise, and you probably know the rest of the story. Today, with 32,000 stores worldwide and a net worth of $7 billion, Kentucky Fried Chicken is one of the world's most recognizable brands. At 75 years old, Colonel Harlan Sanders was faced with yet another decision. Would he give his life to Jesus Christ? Or would he continue to live his life on his own? At that crossroads, he decided to give his life to Christ at 75 years old. And at age 80, him and his wife were baptized in the Jordan River. Ecclesiastes 10:2 says, "A wise person chooses the right road, and a fool takes the wrong one." Harlan Sanders is actually both characters in that verse. He spent a good portion of his life making rash, hot-headed, foolish, wrong decisions. But later in his life, he began making wise decisions, even though they weren't easy. And what I love about Colonel Sanders' story is it's such a powerful reminder that it is never too late to make wise decisions. Let me say this, you are never too young to begin dusting off this treasure that most people know nothing about, called wisdom. You have never made too many mistakes to go to God and say, God, I could really use a fresh start. I could really use some wisdom today. And you are never too old to start using the wonder of wisdom that God offers you. So just as a quick review, wisdom is transformative. Wisdom is humble. Number 3, wisdom is a valuable treasure that nobody's talking about or living with today, but you have the opportunity. Number 4, wisdom is for everyone. Number 5, wisdom is fragile and easily lost, so be very, very careful that how you handle it. And number 6, wisdom leads to good choices. I feel like God is saying to some of us today, hey, you've been living your life without wisdom. It hasn't even been on your radar. You're going after knowledge and you want to be smart, you want to be successful, but maybe it's time that you began to realize there is something beyond your default settings and your own limitations. And I would love nothing more, God says. I would love nothing more than to walk with you and to pour into your life wisdom. So, be a little more like a 3-year-old finding a pretty rock. Bend low, reach down, pick it up, let it guide you on the road to wisdom, because wisdom truly is a gift and a treasure that God makes available to you. Let's worship together.